Well, hello. Welcome to episode 10 of the Future Belongs Creators. For those of you not watching live, Barrett had a ridiculous face to kick us off, as usual. Yeah, there it is again. All right. Today, our topic is on mastermind groups. More specifically, how to surround yourself with remarkable people who can help you grow your business, accomplish what you want, and just help you stay sane and get through stressful times. Barrett, welcome to the show. How you
Well, hey,
doing?
thank you. I'm pretty good. It's Monday. I think I've mentioned this before, but the weeks have felt quite long lately. So I'm hoping that this one passes smoothly, that people stay safe, they stay healthy. But let's see. This weekend, oh man, it's bad to laugh at a joke before you tell it. It's actually not a joke, is the sad thing. So
It's
we have
just
a
from your life.
very small lawn at our house. Okay, very small. There's just like a little strip right by the sidewalk out front. And then we have a little bit of a bigger one in the back. Well, I have this romantic idea of gardening and everything. And I really enjoy using my hands, which I know you like with woodworking too, because we use our brains and fingertips for typing all week. So I just decided I'm going to get a manual reel mower for our lawn here at home and some hand shears to edge by hand, because I don't want
Yeah.
like gas powered tools,
Right. No, that makes sense.
because it's just not, there's not enough space for it to make sense. Then I got to worry about gas and oil. And, I had a lawn business in high school. It's too much work. So anyways, I got out front and I trimmed the lawn by hand. And I got to say, it was kind of nice. I like got the squares around our two trees out front perfect again. I
Okay.
just sat out there and enjoyed it. Got a little fresh air in between the rainstorms. So anyways, that was what I did this weekend. What'd you do this weekend?
Well, hold on. We're not moving on that quickly. Okay. So I understand the push lawnmower, right?
Yep. Yep.
It spins the blades based on the pushing movement. I'm
Mm-hmm.
familiar with those. And then is it just a pair of scissors for the edges or more sophisticated than that? I'm not
Well,
sure.
they're called lawn shears.
Oh, wait,
I
lawn shears are a thing?
Oh yeah. I feel like there
Okay.
was a movie. I feel like it
Is
might have
this going to be
been.
your resource of the day?
I feel like
Lawn
there might
shears?
have. Yes. I feel like there might have been an Adam Sandler movie where there's someone like Billy Madison. Maybe there's a guy with lawn shears or something. Anyways, they're scissors, but they're made for the lawn. So
Okay.
they cut grass well. And so you just kind of go right along the edge of the sidewalk and you trim it, and it looks really nice and square afterwards. It was very
Nice.
satisfying.
I like it. I like it. Okay, so sorry. I'm just imagining you like kneeling down on the ground, just like and like some neighbor walking by,
That is literally
but
what happened.
having to move away because you're next to the sidewalk and they
But
can't come within
the
6 feet.
difference though is that it's like everyone in the neighborhood walked by, because that's the only thing people can do right now. And so I'm convinced the whole neighborhood just probably thinks I'm like this anal retentive, gardener person, and they better not let their dog pee on my lawn or something, which, that's fine if they want to think that.
That is a totally fine outcome. Well, I also did some gardening this weekend. We got a couple rows of a garden planted, so spent some time doing that. It rained yesterday, so I didn't do as much there. But yeah, then I spent probably 8 or 10 hours on the tiny house this weekend, so that was good. If you follow me on Instagram, I posted a photo of some nice looking countertops and a ladder, and I don't know what else. But yeah, so I'm good. Yeah, ready to dive into the week.
I realized we didn't give colors. That's the whole shtick. I'm green
Oh,
right now. I'm green now.
I'm green. I think I was yellow earlier, but now after laughing at the lawn story, like I'm for sure green.
That's kind of how I feel. You get the grass clippings, they're green, and here we are.
That's right. Which is also the tea that you're drinking is made from grass clippings. So
Heyo.
no.
Wow, we're on a
Yeah.
roll today. This is going to be something special.
At least we've only wasted 4 minutes of your time so far. So all right. Well,
Oh,
we're both
Lord.
green. Hopefully you're all doing well as well. I guess we should do an obligatory number and state of the world check-in.
Yes, the New York Times. You always pull up the Johns Hopkins University one, which I think is more regularly up to date. But New York Times, as of this morning, had us at 144,000 cases in the U.S. So we are rapidly continuing to grow. And President Trump extended the social distancing recommendations across the country through April 30th, which is, for the current government, that's a big move based
Yep.
on how they had been talking about things, which I think is a positive development. But I think it also shows how serious things are at this point, that they would be willing to extend it all the way through the end of April. Other interesting news coming out of Japan, which was held up as this like unicorn scenario. In fact, someone was chastising me on Twitter about the fact that we could take a different approach like Japan. And I said, well, it doesn't seem like there's anything to learn from other than that they've done very little. And pretty much as soon as they announced delay of the Olympics, the case numbers started shooting up. So I'm not going to say that's causative or correlated, but I'm just going to say it's pretty weird.
Oh man, I think it's going to be interesting. Maybe a year from now, 5 years from now, or something. Is like, or maybe we fast forward a lot further, right? And our kids are reading in their history books about this time period, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a whole section or something on like government purposeful use of misinformation to accomplish what they need.
Right.
So like on mask usage, right? Like masks don't do anything; they're not any good. And also we're saying that so you don't hoard the masks, or like we want the Olympics to still happen. So see, our numbers are still really low. Oh, just kidding. Okay, the Olympics are off. Okay, well, here's some higher numbers. It'll be interesting.
Yes.
There's a lot of that. One thing that we did over the weekend that was really helpful was, I don't know if this is really nerdy or what, but like define our social distancing guidelines, our quarantine guidelines, because we've been, staying at home and making a lot of decisions on a one-off. Like, are we going to go to the store? Under what circumstances? What, can we see family members who are also quarantined? We have a few family members in our quarantine bubble where we just hang out with each other, and that's it. But then, like, can we introduce more family members into this? How quarantined are they? And we finally just sat down and like hashed it all out and defined that as a family, and it was really helpful because it moved all these one-off decisions to like a set system, and it made things a lot less stressful.
Yeah. Anytime you can, maybe that'll be an episode at some point, but anytime you can turn one-off decisions into a decision-making system, it just reduces a bunch of that overhead on an ongoing basis. Okay, cool. Let's get into our topic. Our topic of the day is mastermind groups. And mastermind groups are near and dear to our heart because that is how we grew close over a number of years. So maybe we'll kick things off just kind of sharing why we talk about this and where that comes from for us, a little bit of history there, and then get into some of our recommendations for how to find one of your own. So yeah, you want to start us off with kind of the history?
Yeah. So in 2012, I went to the World Domination Summit, first like blogging conference that I'd been to, any of that world. I was like starting a blog. I was getting into all of this and went to the event. And I remember being super shy and introverted and then like deciding, okay, I have to meet people this weekend. Like, I don't know anybody here. I can't go through a whole weekend of like 1,000 amazing people here and like only meeting people who say hi to me. And so I like got, went and registered and like kind of tried to see if there were people around to talk to, but everyone was in a conversation. And then like just across the street from registration, I saw two tall bald guys just standing there talking. They were very similar in appearance, both ridiculously tall and completely bald.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, all right, I'll go over and talk to them. So I walked over and introduced myself and joined their conversation. And then they invited me to the meetup that they were heading to next, which I had seen a little bit, like I'd seen in the app for the event. I thought, okay, maybe I would check that out. And they're like, oh, we actually are headed there as well. And it was Caleb Wojcik and James Clear. And then the meetup that I went to was the Think Traffic meetup, which later became Fizzle and everything else. And then I think, Barrett, you and I met a little later that same evening because you'd already met Caleb, maybe?
Yep. I had met Caleb and Corbett, and I think I went to the Think Traffic meetup maybe.
Okay.
Because I had been, at that point, I had already interviewed Corbett, who I ended up working with later on a podcast of mine. And so he kind of ended up being the entry point for me. And I met Caleb through him, who because Caleb was working for. So Caleb Wojcik is a videographer, and well, actually, mostly he's a YouTuber now who teaches about videography, but he's also an artist on his own. And then Corbett has been around a long time. He ran a couple of startups back in the day. Had a site called thinktraffic.net, and then fizzle.co, where I worked before I came to ConvertKit. So that was the origins of all of this stuff there that evening.
Yeah, and it was all on the same day. Because actually, remember you and Nicole at the opening party later that night, I think, which is when we met, and like just dancing at the opening party and hanging out and having a good time. And it was just like this group, and that was, we didn't know it at the time, but that was the start of our mastermind group.
Yep. And so coming out of that, we ended up with, I think, a group of 5 of us. I want to say it was me, you, Caleb, a guy named Nathan Agan, and then 2 women named Krista Stryker and Shannon. Oh, wow. I'm blanking on my friend Shannon's last name. Shannon.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And yeah, we got kicked off there. And so what that ended up turning into was, I think it was like a 5-year, we still kind of get together on trips, but we don't meet as often. But we basically had this group of 5 people, and a couple people rotated out and a couple people rotated in, but that met every week for years on end. Eventually we kind of went to every other week, and somewhere along the way we started hosting retreats, and those have become some of our closest friends now. So today, I think the reason we wanted to talk about this is that was maybe the single most impactful thing that we all did together in terms of motivating one another, holding each other accountable, and just being cheerleaders for one another's work. Because the creator journey it's scary, it's hard, it's easy to doubt yourself, it's sometimes hard to know which direction to go in. And having a group of peers who are on that journey with you, or alongside you at least, who know what it feels like and can see your work more objectively than you can just be a really powerful way to force you to keep going. So
with that, well, one other thought there. I've had a few people say to me, right, we'll post these photos of one of our mastermind weekends or something that we do, and it's usually a bunch of the photo of the whole group together. And like in that group is like Baron Quadro and Sean McCabe and James Clear and Caleb and you and I and Ryan Delk and others. And you look at this and people go like, wow, you got so lucky to end up in that group. And that's like, the group of such successful people. And I realized it's actually thinking about it backwards. Like, it's not chance that, even if you just take, say like James and myself, right? It's not chance that we happen to find each other and all of that. It's that everybody invested so much in that group that it raised everybody. So it wasn't like we got lucky in who we discovered. It's that we were incredibly intentional about like working really, really hard and curating the group as well. But, putting together a group of people where every week, every month, we were investing in each other's businesses and raising the tide of everything.
Yeah. And I think it would be revisionist history to say, oh, wow, how'd you meet all those people? Because we're all still relative nobodies. But when we met, I mean, we were nobodies.
Right.
I think James was probably the most well-known because he had an audience of 10,000 or something like that. Maybe
I think it was trending towards 10,000, but
for a site called passivepanda.com. We're revealing all of our friends' secrets right now. So let's start with what is a mastermind group? And the way I would define a mastermind group is a group of, let's call it 4 to 7 peers on a similar journey together with similar goals, who meet on a regular basis to hold each other accountable. I think that's the simplest way I can define it. And it's not much more complicated than that, but finding those people can be really challenging. So when we think about how to go find those people, I think the first thing you've got to really do some self-discovery on is, what do you want from a group like this? What is your intention, and what is your commitment going to be to a group like this? Because it's a commitment in and of itself. In addition to the benefits, you've got to show up and be there for people. So Nathan, when you think back, I don't know that we necessarily went into it intentionally saying, I'm going to form a mastermind group, but we're teaching people to do that. So if you had to think back, what would you have wanted from a group at the time that we got started?
Yeah. So the first thing I would do is, as close as I can, try to define where I'm going, right? Because you want to find people who are trying to go to roughly the same place that you are. And so if I look back at those early days, where I was trying to go is earning a living from my own audience, basically selling products online. And so I even remember like talking to Caleb, and he was fully in that space of working for Corbett at Think Traffic, and he was following Pat Flynn, and I remember being like, Pat who? And like Caleb giving me this look like, what? You, okay, all right, yeah, Pat Flynn. He's this blogger. You should check him out. And so in doing that, right, and finding people trying to go to the same place that I was, then I ended up with people who said like, oh, we'll also check out this resource. And, we're all largely in the same spot. So the first thing is define where you want to go, and then also your starting point, right? Because you don't want to get people who are at vastly different areas that they're starting from. And then I would start to look in your existing network. Maybe it's not just who you're friends with, but who you follow on Twitter. Like you're like, yeah, we're internet friends, right? But they're kind of one, like, if you're honest with yourself, they're actually outside that circle. I have a lot of friends like that. But if you start to look at those and say, okay, who out of this group matches my values, where I'm at and where I'm trying to go? And those are, you don't start out by saying like, hey, do you want to join a mastermind group? But that's who you start to think, okay, this is the kind of person that I'm looking for, that I would resonate with, and we could really help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. If I had to, if I were going to like start today, and not related to our work on ConvertKit, but maybe I think of myself as a writer, in terms of my creator identity, that's very much where I spend my thinking time. I would look for other essayists, and I use the term essay because I think number one, it indicates a certain level of ego in terms of how important your writing is. But I think it's also a good indicator of the intention behind the writing. When I think of writing essays, I think about something that's meant to curate and compile facts in a compelling argument towards some outcome, or around some topic. And I'm really fascinated by things like updates to the education system that will produce much better outcomes for adults, not just kids on tests today, or how we combat climate change in a proactive way that doesn't completely interrupt economies and things like this. And so I'd be looking for other people writing long form, interesting essays, because I want other people who take their writing seriously to be critiquing my work. And I also want to be inspired by that kind of work, which I would be by critiquing their work as well. So I'd be looking for people like that who could hold me accountable, who have a standard of work that's very similar to mine, and that are exploring not the same topics, but topics with a similar level of rigor and research and all of that. So by sharing that, my hope is that just kind of sparks something for you. What's your equivalent, basically, in terms of who you're looking for? And then I think the next question becomes, okay, so how do I find them? And you got into a little bit of this a minute ago, Nathan. I've got a couple tips here. The first one I'll share, and then I'd love to hear more of your thoughts, is for I don't know, a year maybe, I had a podcast. At the time, my business was called the Living for Monday. And it was on this premise that I think everyone who is aware enough to even want to listen to something like that should be able to find work that's very meaningful to them. And I had a podcast where I wanted to interview people about finding meaningful work, either because they were doing work that they found meaningful, or they had advice for people on finding it. And it turned out that podcast became a really valuable way for me to meet people, because it's very flattering to be asked to be on a podcast. And for many people, I mean, unless they're like top tier, literally have no time, a lot of people will say yes, even without knowing how big your audience is. You've got to get a little better at it if they're like really a well-known famous person. But I found that was a really great way to actually meet people who went on to become friends over time. Like I can look back at my podcast guest list, and I'll post a link in the show notes to that because it's still on the internet somewhere. And almost all of those people are now close friends of mine, or at least acquaintances that I can get in touch with if I ever have questions. So starting a podcast, an interview show, is actually ironically a great way to meet people for the first time who might end up becoming peers of yours as time goes on. So that would be one of my tips.
Yeah. The other one that I'd add is going to conferences. I think that's obvious from our story that we shared, but um, that was such a way to find like-minded people and to cut through so much noise. And the other thing is that it gave us this list of people who were willing to show up, right? Because there's a difference between someone who's like, yeah, maybe, in your example, a great writer. I'm really focused on my craft. But actually, one reason I like writing is because I never talk to people and I hide away in my mountain cabin. And so, and you're like, do you want to join a mastermind group? They're like, hell no. Like, what part of what I just said did you not understand? But at the conference, you get this group of people who are eager to learn, eager to connect and meet other people. And they're actually showing up largely with the same goals. Like, I'm not just here to learn from people on stage, but I'm here to connect with other people who can help me in my journey. And so that's like when you're at that conference, when we as a society do conferences again, um, you can go about and connect with people with that knowledge that okay, I came to meet people, and actually you all did too. So I'm doing us both a favor when I walk up and introduce myself. But that gave me a thought about like online conferences. I think you could do. I actually think right now this could work well. If you did like a roundtable series, maybe you live stream it, maybe you don't, but you go to your Twitter network and find people who are at roughly the same place where maybe everyone's trying to build a YouTube channel. So you look through your friends, okay, who has between 100 and 2,000 YouTube subscribers that's all building a channel and starting to put in a decent amount of work? What if you emailed all of them and say, hey, I would love to do a little Zoom roundtable with 8 of us. And we basically just get on a Zoom call. We're not promoting it. We're not doing anything. We're just getting to know each other, checking on how life is right now, and sharing what we've learned about consistently creating videos and how to grow a YouTube channel. And I bet if you did that in today's day and age, like people being stuck at home and looking for a connection, people would be like, yes, I would love to show up for that. Here's a couple times that it would work for me. And if you did one of those every week or every couple of weeks with like different pockets of groups, you'd expand your network like crazy.
Yeah, I love that idea. Caleb Wojcik actually did a version of this, a fancy version of this, where he invited some YouTubers into his studio, or it might have been a YouTube space, actually. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And they did a round table with 7 cameras and everything. So it was a little bit more produced, but it was along the same lines of he wanted to meet or be in the same space as some of these people and invited them all to come join him. So I love that idea. The other thing I'll say is that I'm going to say back in the day, but let's say 10 years ago, 10 years ago, when the internet was in a little bit of a different phase and blog comments were still a thing. And certainly on YouTube and Instagram, there's still some of that going on, but blog comments are definitely not still a thing for the most part. The advice was that if you showed up consistently in someone's blog content or blog comments, whose work you admired and you wanted to get close to, with thoughtful commentary on the piece or just like encouragement, that you would become a known quantity to them. At least, you'd become internet friends, essentially. I think the same could be true of YouTube comments, Instagram comments, and Twitter, especially today.
Yeah.
I find that Twitter is a really valuable place to, meet people is probably too strong of a phrase for it. But like you were saying earlier, there is something about seeing a person consistently pop up in your Twitter feed with thoughtful commentary or responses to whatever you're talking about. And I think the same is true for any platform where people are active and there's conversation happening. The point of these tools is conversation, and people rarely use it that way. It's usually a megaphone or just like silent listening. But if you can be engaging with people, you can sometimes get to know them.
Yep, I think that's so important, and Twitter and the sites that still have comments are really great for if you have specific feedback to put in there. So on that note, Barrett, let's say we find our group, we get 3 to 5 people, which would be our recommendation. We wouldn't really go beyond 5 people in a mastermind group. Maybe 4 or 5 is the number that I would target.
Yep.
So you have those people. Where would you start as far as I forget the logistics of when we schedule our Zoom call and that kind of thing, but where would you start as far as actually getting the most value out of that group? What questions do you ask? What format would you follow?
Yeah. So I think my favorite format that we got into during our time running a group like this was to have, I'd say every other week or monthly to start would be kind of the frequency. And I would kick it off with, like, if there's 4 people, maybe 8 minutes max of kind of a red, yellow, green. And what's the most important thing that you accomplished? And what are you struggling with right now? So how are you doing? What did you accomplish since last time? What are you struggling with? And then on a rotating basis, and because of the rotating basis, this is sometimes why frequency being increased can be helpful because you come back around more often. But on a rotating basis, the rest of the call would be spent on what we call a hot seat, where one person would come with a business situation or a struggle that they have, and the whole group would focus on just that issue for the entire time. Let's call it 30 minutes. Or if you wanted to break it up, you could do half and half, maybe 20 minutes for 2 hot seats on one call. And what's powerful about that is that you get all of these different minds that have different information percolating in them, focusing on one single problem that usually is solvable and that you may not be seeing clearly because you're all up in your head thinking about all the reasons why you can't do it or what's going to get in your way. And I think we've had a lot of breakthroughs. Like I remember one, hopefully this isn't too much inside baseball, so I'm sorry, James, if it is, but we were talking about James's book title for Atomic Habits and different options he had for that and really did a deep dive there. Or back in the day when ConvertKit was just getting started, we did one on the subtag or the sub headline for ConvertKit. At the time, I think you were calling it email marketing for authors, and that wasn't quite resonating the right way. And you ended up going with email marketing for bloggers out of that session. And that really helped with the positioning from there on out. So these little 20 to 30 minute hot seats would be the focus that I would have in the core of our meetings on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that's good. And then we don't have too much time left, but I'd love to touch on mastermind retreats, and maybe we can do a whole episode on that later. But I think that first retreat that you put together and organized really was a turning point. And I remember actually when we were talking about ConvertKit and the subtitles, that was was that in North Carolina at your parents' mountain cabin?
Mm-hmm.
Just us, everybody flew into Atlanta. We all piled into a truck and drove up to the mountains, and we just had a really good time of actually seeing each other in person, spending time together. And it really worked to bring all the relationships to the next level. So as people are thinking about, showing up in person and putting together that first retreat, what would you have them think about?
So I think the first thing would be having food. That might seem like a weird first thing, but actually meals are when you get to know people. The sessions that you have structured are really good and helpful for business. But when it comes to connection, sitting down to meals, I think is incredibly important. And we still find that at our retreats for our team today. And so I'd have someone, that first retreat, I think I was in charge of cooking for the most part, and I just put all the meals together. Someone should be in charge of planning the food, shopping, and cooking, and then sit down to meals together.
Right.
And even if it's just like taking a box of the table topics cards with you, ask some meaningful questions every time you sit down to a meal and just go around the table and have everyone share their perspective, because you'll come away feeling like, damn, that's some of the most meaningful conversation I've had in a really long time. So that would be my first tip. What's one on your end?
Well, that just made me think of 2 questions that I would use. I'm trying to remember. I learned both these from the Mastermind Talks community. But one is, what's something from the last 6 months that you're the most proud of? And like, if you just sit down at dinner with people you don't know very well and ask that question, you'll learn so much more about them. And then the other one is also from that community, but I think it comes from Clay Hebert. And that's, if we were together a year from now with a bottle of champagne, what are we celebrating?
I love that.
And so those 2 questions like give you an insight into who somebody is and then where they're trying to go. And that's perfect for a mastermind. Emily asked a great question that I want to touch on, because we probably have strong opinions on this, of curious about if you think all masterminds should be paid or free. I have strong opinions. Barrett, do you have equally strong opinions?
Well, I don't know. I'm interested
Should I dive in?
what you think. Yeah.
Okay. So I think masterminds are super useful, but I think that they should be grassroots. I think that if you have no network at all, or maybe there's a community that you want to get into, a paid mastermind is an option. I would really encourage you to go for a free mastermind that you organize and facilitate yourself. Now, I say that, and I've paid to go to plenty of mastermind type conferences. You can jump into a community a lot more easily. But if you're starting out, curate that yourself. Like, the skills needed to introduce yourself and get to know people and be the person pulling that group together, it's going to be really, really important. And there's a lot of paid masterminds that I think are overpriced and that's not a business model that I would pursue.
Yeah.
So I would say focus on the free side.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's often just a facilitated conversation. I'm not putting down people who lead masterminds. Like I think there are facilitators who can be exceptional. I
Mhm.
think that's quite rare in the same way that a great business or life coach is quite rare, but they exist. I think the same is true for a mastermind facilitator. I think that the power in free comes from the intention of everyone being there. It's really hard to find the right group. And like I said, we cycled through a number of people before we landed on a core crew that stuck together for a long time. But once you find it, I think it can be way more powerful and it doesn't cost you any money. It costs you time and attention, and maybe money to go to retreats or whatever. But uh, my tip for that is if you think of yourself as the driving force behind the group, you don't wait for someone else to do it. You don't begrudge the other people for not being as committed as you are. You just say, I'm going to lead this thing. I'm going to step up and be the inviter and the scheduler and the organizer and everything else. You'll be way less disappointed. And I think you'll find that every group has to have a leader anyways. There has to be a
Right.
leader of the group, even if it's not a title or anything like that. I think you'll find a lot of power in that.
Yeah. And probably the other thing is paid is a good gate. Yeah, a good gate for that. With people saying like, "Am I committed enough?" or any of that. But you don't need the money necessarily to be going to someone. It's not like, okay, now that like I pulled the five of you together and you all now owe me $500 for the work that I'm doing to facilitate this. But if you want people to be committed, then you could say, okay, we are going to pay $250 each or $500 each to join into this. And that money is going to go into the fund for a first retreat or something that we're all going to do collectively. So it's still very pure run and we're all taking responsibility for it. We're not just like showing up and be like, I don't know, I paid this money, you run the thing. Um, but we're also have that buy-in and we're moving towards something really exciting there.
Yep, totally. Okay, let's jump into creators of the day. That wraps up our conversation on mastermind groups. I posted a couple of links. We'll add them in the show notes on how to start a mastermind group from me, how to run a mastermind group retreat from me. Nathan's got a great article on unsolicited feedback, which is one of the exercises that we started as a mastermind group and have now brought into ConvertKit that we'll post as well, because that's another good one. Creators of the day. Nathan, you want me to go first? You want to go first?
I'll go first. So I'm going to pick someone who I work with all the time, but I think you all should follow, and that's Derek Hicks. So he's our director of marketing at ConvertKit. We have this value at ConvertKit of work in public, sharing what we're learning and all of that. And Derek has started to do that. So he started his own email list. If you go to Derek Hicks, and Derek is DERRICK. So derekhicks.ck.page, you can check out his landing page, his newsletter there. It's just been fun to see him put out more content on leadership and leading a remote team and all of that. He's been publishing it on LinkedIn and on other platforms. So definitely check out his stuff.
Agreed. Love his stuff. He also has been a creator himself in a variety of different ways, but as a drummer especially. So he loves the music space. Okay, mine for the day is good friend of mine. Actually, we go all the way back to college and then randomly both ended up moving out here to Portland. Her name's Lindsay Gilmore, and she is an artist. She's been an illustrator in the past and now has moved into more fine art. And if you're looking for kind of like accent pieces for your home, literally painted canvases, they're beautiful. She's also got a great print shop of some of her illustrations. She's got like the seven natural wonders of Oregon, the bridges of Oregon, and other things like that. But her art's gorgeous. I love her stuff because it was so human, the journey she went through, just getting to the point where she was willing to say she was an artist, not just an illustrator, and now her work sells out almost immediately when she launches it, which I just think is fantastic. It's a great example of why, even when inside you might have some doubts, putting it out there can show you just how much support you have for your work and how good you are when you get out of that kind of self-doubt mindset. So love
That's
Lindsay's work.
awesome.
Hope you'll check her out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love just the idea of things selling out. And so I really want to get into a business. There's a lot of reasons that I don't want to get into this business, but I really want to get into a business that has like a limited inventory to do like these short runs of whether it's prints or art or woodworking things or whatever. Cause I just love the idea of this rabid fan base that's so excited for what you have. And you're like, okay, and there's 10 of these and go. So sometime I'll do a business like that. When it comes to resources of the day, now with working out at home, I bought a pull-up bar, and I was going to link to the specific one, but it's sold out on Amazon now because everyone is apparently setting up home gyms. But I spent about $100, got a good pull-up bar that mounts to the wall. A nice, really sturdy one, like at the gym, not like one of those little flimsy ones that goes in the doorway. And today was the first day of using it. Pretty happy about it. When I walk from my office into the main house, I have to walk right by it. So I'm up to 40 pull-ups so far today, just because I do a set of 8 or so each time I walk by. And it's been great. So that's definitely a life improvement for me. So if you find a way to get one of those and you have a spot to put it, highly recommended.
Love it. I had one resource down, but I'm actually going to say another one that's more applicable today. One of the most, I keep a stack of the books that have been most impactful to my life and approach to work. One of them is called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And I think when it comes to mastermind groups, it is the perfect anthology for building relationships in a way that would make people want to spend time with you on a consistent basis. So I would definitely suggest that one. It's in my short stack of the best books I've ever read. And I think it'll maybe change your approach to how you build relationships, if for no other reason than not to let people take advantage of you, which is the hook of the whole book.
That's good. Yeah, Adam Grant's work is fantastic. I love that. Well, as we wrap up, we're talking about masterminds and all of that, and there's this idea that everyone talks about that probably people think is overplayed, of like you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, and I would just say that it's not overplayed. Like that is actually the truth. And so as we wrap up, just think about being really deliberate with who you're going to put into your community, where you want to go, who you're going to surround yourself with, and seek those people out, because those random people that you follow on Twitter and think do really cool work, they can be your friends, and they can be the people who encourage you through tough times and all of that. You just have to take that first step, get to know them, invite them to do, a little round table or something like that, and see if it develops into a mastermind group.
Yeah, I would just say be really careful, because you might end up running a software company and doing a daily podcast with them. So you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's right. All right. On that note, before Barrett does anything to insult me, we're going to wrap up. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, y'all.